"She's gone," he whispered to himself, though the wind carried the words away before he could believe them. Gone, and what's left isn't her. For days the man had watched his wife change. At first, it was nothing more than a strange distance in her eyes, a quietness that he had never known in her before. But then her appetite had dwindled. Her skin had grown pale, her eyes sunken. Worst of all was the cold. She seemed drawn to it, standing outside for hours at night, staring into the dark woods as if listening to a call only she could hear. And now he was certain, she was not his wife anymore. She was a Wendigo. The Wendigo, part myth, part nightmare fuel, and 100% not something you'd want crashing your camping trip. The Wendigo's origins come from the Algonquin-speaking tribes of North America, including the Ojibwa, Cree, Naskapi, and Innu peoples, who clearly had a flair for creating folklore that made children and adults shit their pants. The story begins, as all great horror tales do, with isolation, hunger, and a terrible winter. But let's be real. If you want to birth a legendary man-eating creature, you're not doing it during a spring picnic. No, you need blizzards, desperation, and the kind of cold that makes your shortened curlies curl up even more. According to legend, the Wendigo was once an ordinary human, a hunter who, like many of us when we're hangry, made a really bad decision. Stranded in the freezing wilderness without food, this unlucky fellow did what any rational person wouldn't do. He turned his hunting buddies into a buffet. But here's the catch. This wasn't just your average case of Jeffrey Dahmer. By dining on human flesh, the hunter became possessed by an evil spirit, transforming into a Wendigo. Now physically, the Wendigo looks like a walking before photo in a zombie diet commercial, gaunt, skeletal, with skin stretched so tightly over its bones that it looks like it's always 1 calorie away from falling apart. Some legends say it grows larger with every meal and are constantly hungry, a cursed existence where no amount of food will ever satisfy their cravings. It's like being stuck on an eternal keto diet. No matter how much you eat, you're still miserable. But the story isn't just about one unlucky guy who made some questionable menu choices. No, the Wendigo legend evolved to become a cautionary tale about greed, gluttony, and what happens when you decide you're too cool for societal norms, like not eating your friends. In some versions, people don't have to resort to cannibalism to become a Wendigo. They just need to be greedy enough, which means your NFL team's wide receiver may want to rethink his latest demands. The fear of becoming a Wendigo was so deeply ingrained in certain tribes that they held ceremonies to reinforce the taboo against cannibalism. Wendigo-themed dance parties where people dance backward around a drum while wearing masks. Nothing like a bit of reverse conga to remind you not to snack on your neighbor. Modern interpretations of the Wendigo have taken it beyond folklore, transforming it into a symbol of unchecked consumption and human depravity. Some even claim Wendigo psychosis is a real thing, a condition where sufferers develop an insatiable craving for human flesh. Sounds a little like The Walking Dead, right? Well, except it's allegedly happened a few times in history. In 1879, Swift Runner, a Cree trapper from Alberta, found himself facing a classic Canadian problem: a brutal winter, starvation, and way too many mouths to feed. He was only 25 miles from the nearest Hudson's Bay Company trading post, where supplies were readily available. But instead of taking the long walk to pick up some food, he decided that family dinners would take on a whole new, horrifying meaning. Swift Runner didn't just snack on a relative or two. He went full buffet mode, devouring his wife and 6 children. The kicker? He blamed it all on the Wendigo spirit, claiming it possessed him and drove him to cannibalism. Swift Runner was hoping the district attorneys of his day would buy his story of blaming an evil force demon. Spoiler alert, they didn't buy his excuse and sentenced him to death by hanging. Jack Fiddler supplied supernatural pest control to the inhabitants of the Canadian wilderness in the early 1900s. He claimed to have personally taken down at least 14 Wendigos. Whether these were actual force demons or just folks having a rough time, well, that's up for debate. But in a world where winter meant starvation and creepy legends were as real as frostbite, people were happy to let him do his thing. In 1907, Jack and his brother Joseph found themselves in a bit of legal hot water when Canadian authorities decided that their Wendigo slaying hobby looked suspiciously like plain old murder. The brothers were arrested after they killed a woman they claimed was on the brink of becoming a Wendigo. Jack, clearly not a fan of courtroom drama, opted out by committing suicide before his trial. Brother Joseph wasn't as lucky. He was sentenced to life in prison, received a pardon, and then pulled the ultimate tragic twist by dying 3 days before getting the good news. Now, this was a tragic tale where typhoid fever, paranoia, and a dash of Wendigo hysteria brewed into one truly grim outcome. It all started in the Barrens River Reserve of Manitoba, where a Native American woman fell ill with typhoid. Now, typhoid fever isn't exactly known for its glamorous symptoms. It causes high fevers, delirium, and erratic behavior. Unfortunately for this poor woman, erratic behavior in the late 19th century could get you branded as something far worse than really sick. Her husband, convinced she was transforming into a Wendigo, decided that the best cure for possession was breaking her neck. Spoiler alert, that didn't work. Instead, it earned him a murder charge as the authorities were not sympathetic to his methods of exorcism. Now, this case highlights the deep-seated fear of Wendigos in Cree communities and how legends of supernatural cannibal monsters could drive real-world actions. In the end, the Wendigo legend is a timeless cautionary tale about hunger, greed, and why you should always pack enough snacks for your winter trip. Whether it's about literal cannibalism or metaphorical greed, the Wendigo serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't lurking in the forest. They're hiding inside us, ready to pop out when things get really bleak, or when you realize the nearest grocery store is 25 miles away. So the next time you feel the urge to devour everything in sight during a hunger-induced rage, just remember, you might not be transforming into a Wendigo, but you are one bad winter away from becoming a legend.